All right, recording is on. Hello, everyone. Today is January 24th, and that's the official community meeting for Velero. As such, please follow the code of conduct. And in other words, just be nice to each other. My name is Ulim Vasiliev, and I'm the community manager for Velero, and I'll be facilitating this meeting. With that, I'm going to send the link into the chat to our community meetings notes. Feel free to add yourself into the notes if you feel like it, and add your topics for discussion and so on. I'm going to share that. Hope you can see my screen. I make it a bit smaller so it can fit around screens. All righty. So, Scott, go ahead. I think you have a lot of updates. So
yes. So everything here is kind of related to the larger epic of the asynchronous plugin operations. That's one of the big features for 1.11. I got 2 PRs reviewed and merged last week. One of them is the item operations JSON format. This is kind of what we store in the BSL to track asynchronous operations and current status. And the other is the API update v2 for the restore item action. I also have 1 PR that's still out for review. It's not on the critical path. It's just in the Velero plugin example. But basically, this PR implements the v2 API for the backup item action. So there's a v1 and a v2 plugin in the plugin examples with this PR. It doesn't do anything with the new APIs yet because we don't have the controller work, but it shows that you can register in v1 and a v2 plugin, and they're both picked up by a controller looking for v2 because of the adapter. I will at some point need to do an equivalent for the restore item action as well for this. But anyway, so it would be good to get this merged before I do that. But it's not blocking anything else in the main repo because nothing else depends on this directly. The main thing I'm working on this week is I've started working on the backup controller work. No PR yet, but this is going to implement the logic to actually track those actions, upload them at the end of the backup, and then check on them, on subsequent backups. That's kind of the bulk of the functionality on top of the APIs for the backup side. Once that's done, the other big thing that we need for 1.11 is the restore equivalent. That pretty much covers the bulk of this work, aside from some cleanup, but that's kind of where we are with those. So I know we're on a tight schedule here, but I think we're still on track at this point with these remaining bits.
do you need any help from the rest of the team on this stuff?
I mean, I know the Beijing team's off this week. When they get back, it would be good to review this plugin example. But again, it's not blocking me, so there's no urgency to pull anyone out of holiday or anything else. It's fine to wait till next week. And I hope to have at least a draft version of that PR by next week. Hopefully, maybe ready for review. But in any case, there'll be something submitted. But I just started working on that yesterday, so I don't have anything posted yet.
Yeah.
So I'm not waiting on anyone right now. Critically.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. By the way, the folks from Beijing, they most probably won't be back, all of them, next week, because today's their celebration, the Lunar Year.
Yeah.
And most of them, they are taking like the second week off as well.
Okay. Are we still having a community meeting next week, or?
I think so. It makes sense. It makes sense to have.
Yeah, I think so. I just as long as if is anybody going to be there, or is it going to be pretty much everyone gone next week?
Let's scroll down to see what was decided. I
don't think we talked about post.
I'm not sure, but yeah.
It sounds like most of them will be out next week.
Yeah, the folks from Beijing team from VMware, most probably all of them will be off, but we have enough critical mass for meeting from rest of the world and other companies. So
yeah,
I don't know. Depends on you. It's gonna be definitely not my daytime.
Right.
So,
exactly. Because I just noticed that they're saying they're going to be out 21st to 29th, and the next week's meeting would actually be on the February 1st for them. So
yeah, the official holidays are
Right, but then they're
21st
taking vacation
into
after that. It's fine.
yeah.
You know, get
Yeah.
it.
So I don't know.
I mean, there was no mention that we wouldn't have the call, so that's why I'm assuming
Yeah.
it's still scheduled.
Yeah. So if you ask me, let's have it, and if nobody joins, let's take the time back.
Yeah.
All right.
That makes sense.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Shubham, you're next.
Yeah, not much of an update, but I've been doing some PR reviews and setting up the Velero session with the IT Press Tour team. The session will be on 26th of this week. So I'll be preparing for that, and that's it from my side.
Thanks. For those of you who doesn't know, the IT Press Tour is an organization of journalists that are going from office to office and talking to different companies and their employees about different projects and products. So they asked me if someone from our side can join, and that is going to be in the Silicon Valley. And Shubham was super nice to take that, and that will happen. Was that Shubham on 26th, right?
Yep.
Yeah, in the Red Hat office. It's going to be focused only on Velero as open source project. No product related questions, I hope, from them, but you never know.
Yeah, pretty much it will be regarding the data protection and DR strategies and how Velero is tackling them and
Yep.
why, yeah.
Yeah, and on related topic, for like Velero presentation into the public, I was asked by the guys from Robusta Dev if we can do a session. They have like a YouTube channel called 100 Tools or 100 Kubernetes Tools or something like that. So we're currently in the making of that session with Velero. It's like a 5 to 10 minutes short video about Velero and like to show off a little bit. But once I have something about that, I'll add it into the updates. Right now, it's just super draft. So yeah, next one, Anshu.
Hey, folks. So yeah, hey. So the first PR is like a long-running PR, just bringing it up again for review. Scott has already reviewed it, and it's pending one more review. Been a while, so I just kind of keep pushing it in every meeting if we can get it reviewed and get it checked in. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just pushing this for review. If someone else can review it as soon as we can. Nothing else. This is it for the first PR.
Yeah, but you have some comments from Daniel. So
yeah, Daniel said that he'll review it, but
yeah,
it's
he'll
been
come.
like 3
Okay.
weeks since then, so just wanted to push it again.
Okay, that doesn't look good. I'll try to catch him when he's back on vacation.
Okay.
To figure this out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the second one is the proposal that I've just raised a PR for, and wanted to maybe we can discuss this in the call itself, or we can leave it for offline review. So the problem is basically, as of today, the CSI plugin, it picks up the volume snapshot class by the label, or I think it's the label or annotation on the volume snapshot class. It is like any backup that you do in the cluster, it will fetch the volume snapshot class with that particular label and just pick the first one and use it for the backup. So for people who want to take backup, let's say they want different schedules or different backups covering different aspects of their cluster, and they want to use different volume snapshot classes for those parts, they can't do it as of now. It's like a global setting in some sense, which is used by all backups across, which is a limitation in some sense. And we need a way where we can kind of say, for this backup, use this particular volume snapshot class. That is kind of scope one of the this whole proposal. And the second is, if you go very, very fine grained and very nitty gritty of it, someone might come and say that they want to for a particular PVC, they want to pick a particular volume snapshot class. That is now again a niche requirement, but the first one is a top level one where you say, for a particular backup, I want to use this volume snapshot class. So I have covered 3 proposals, and at a top level, the first approach is through annotations. You provide certain values through annotations. Second approach is, the second approach is not something I know not the community will agree with, but just for the sake of completeness, The second approach is by adding certain CSI specific variables in the backup contracts or the regular Velero contracts. But I understand that we don't want to really bloat up the contracts with plugin specific details. So not really pushing too hard for it, but just for the sake of completeness, we have the second approach. And the third approach is we introduce some generic variable, generic piece in the contract through which we can pass plugin specific things. So for example, in volume snapshot classes, we need a way to pass the names. So it could be a generic property bag where you can send in a bunch of parameters, which the plugin knows how to honor and in what way to honor. So this approach can kind of further accrue to other plugins. For example, the storage class mapping that I believe is also modeled as a plugin today. But even storage class, it takes a config map, but that config map again is a global setting. It is like whatever is there in the cluster, it will pick the first one and use it, kind of thing. So even all I'm saying is this thing could kind of make it more deterministic in what way the plugins can consume extra information, whatever we need to pass to them. For now, this is like for volume snapshot classes, you can basically pass in the parameters, or perhaps you can, let's say, pass in the reference to a config map, which the plugin can use for the duration of that particular backup. So yeah, these are 3 top level approaches, and like we can float it offline for review. Yeah, I'll pause here.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I had made one comment on the review that you kind of mentioned. Yeah, I think of these 3, the only one that I think we specifically probably don't want to do is that second one where we modify the spec. The annotation again is the easy way to do it. That's the way most of the plugins that take config right now. The generic property bag approach is also kind of interesting. And in fact, we're already doing something similar for the storage plugins, like the CSI, a lot of the parameters parameters for S3, for example. We have a config, spec.config, which is just a map that is a way to provide plugin specific configuration. So it might make sense to add that to backup item action, similar to what we're doing with the object store plugin. That would be a plugin API change. So, it would be like a V3 plugin API for backup item action and restore item action, in a future release. But so that would be a lot more work to do it, but the result would add functionality to all plugins, because basically once you add that, it means any backup item action plugin would be able to utilize this config and not have to rely on the annotations anymore.
Right, but
so,
but
I mean, the annotation is the quick fix. You can just do that by modifying the CSI plugin itself at any point. There's no API changes associated with it. That would be a relatively small amount of work that could be done at any point. The property bag approach would be an API change that we would need to go through design for in an updated Velero release to get it, because it would modify the API, plugin API. But we do have plugin versioning now. That was a new thing we added in VN 110 that allows us to make these kinds of API changes. So that's kind of, I guess, in terms of 1, 2, 3, 1 is easy, 2 we don't want to do, and 3 is long-term more valuable, but it's also more involved work because it's modifying core Velero to add a feature that all plugins might make use of. And you, I mean, you could do both. You could do the annotation approach initially, if it's something that was an immediate need, with the longer term design kind of saying, hey, we really want this, Velero support plugin configuration because it's going to be better for all plugins, but we need this now for CSI. And then once the annotation part is done, once the V3 APIs are out and available, then you could deprecate the annotations in the CSI plugin and move to that. So 1 and 3 could both be done. One would be a now thing, and 3 would be a longer term thing. That's another possibility. I don't know, Shubham, do you have any other thoughts on this?
I like the config parameters approach as well. Like similar, it would be similar to what we do for annotations. But yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be plugin specific, and we should keep a longer term view of V3 plugin implementation as well.
Yeah, it also, I think, depends on how urgently you need this.
Yeah.
If this is something like, oh, as soon as possible we want this, then it might be, the annotation approach could be done and without modifying core Velero, it's just a plugin, PR. probably not even a separate design might not be. I'm not sure, because this is just adding a small feature to an existing plugin. But if it's something that it's more of a long-term need that can wait, then going through the plugin API change approach might make more sense. But just know that that's something that obviously wouldn't be starting until after 1.11 would be released. I mean, the design could happen, obviously start earlier, but the implementation wouldn't be until post 1.11. I mean, that's probably true even for the CSI plugin, but I'm just saying the CSI plugin would be a relatively small change. That if PR could be submitted at any point, and depending on how it was reviewed, that might be earlier. But but even that could be post 1.11. But it could. But the config change is kind of a major change that would help all the plugins. In fact, there are other plugins that would probably start using it as soon as you had it available. But that would be a longer development cycle to get to.
Hey, one thought, Scott. So, I mean, I might not be very well versed with the plugin API as such, but how I see it is, right, like the backup, the whole backup CR, the contract itself, the whole CRD itself, right? That is available to the plugin, right? Can't the plugin just query that particular field in the CR and get those values, or do we really need to call it and?
Actually,
That's
you're right. And now that I think about it, you're right. It would be a backup API change. Because obviously we'd add a new field.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
You're right. I was overthinking that. It wouldn't actually be a plugin API change because we already have the backup CR passed in, and we'd have that. So you're right. So it's not as big as I was thinking. It's not a plugin API change. It would just be a CRD change and a backup API change. So yeah, you're right. It's not quite as big as I was thinking originally. We still need to go probably have a design PR for it because it does change the backup and restore API. I'm sure because you want it on both.
Yep.
But okay,
so,
that's right. Sorry. That's good.
Yeah. So considering that is the case, and I see like you folks are also inclined to the third approach, and amongst third, I think you folks, I have two approaches as part of the third approach, right? One is we explicitly say we will pass references to config maps, which extend like plugins people can preset and provide reference to. And the second approach is more of you just pass a random dictionary, random map kind of thing. Or I mean, even the second approach, I kind of dig a little bit deep. If you see, right, the structure is more like you have a map to like on the left hand side, you kind of have what plugin is it for. On the right hand side, then you can have more bunch of key value pairs. So, I mean, I can raise a design PR digging deeper on the second approach, and maybe there we can discuss what contracts make sense or not. Is that okay? Or
yeah. One thing I think it's probably worth looking at, because I mentioned that the object store plugin already uses this. I was thinking, since you mentioned it was not an API change, it's not part of the API itself, but the object store plugin uses the backup storage location. The backup storage location has a field spec.config, which I believe is just a map.
Correct.
Which then provides the plugin specific data. I think that approach probably makes sense. Obviously, it wouldn't go in the BSL; it would go in the backup in this case. But basically, so the BSL has spec.config. Here we might have backup, spec. Plugin BIA config, kind of backup item action config. Kind of that way, if we added configuration to multiple plugin types, it'd probably have a separate map for each one. So like, I don't know that we need anything more than backup item action, restore item action at this point, but I'm just thinking, let's make it specific. So if you did that, instead of creating a separate config map, just create a field spec dot BIA config for backup item action config, and that's going to be a map on the backup. And then once you pass that backup into the actions themselves, that field will be available.
Yeah, like we have provider specific information in BSL config, so this will have plugin specific information.
Correct. So basically, it will be a map from plugin type to its own map. Each plugin will have its own map in some sense, right?
Right, or maybe just it could be plugin type. So the plugin type would probably just be a string. So it would be a string to.
Yeah. You can see the example.
Yeah. Again, I would look at I would look at the exact implementation of the backup BSL config. I don't remember if it's a string to string map or a string to interface map.
It's a string to string map.
It's a string
and
map, yeah.
Yeah, so
but the
probably just do
BSL is-
something similar there. Would make sense since there's
Yeah,
some precedent and kind of we could treat it in a similar way.
Yep. The only nuance is it's per plugin, right? Because I mean, each plugin could have its own set of parameters, whereas BSL is only one itself, right? Like it knows what it's for.
Right,
Whereas
that's
in
true.
this,
I
that's
see
the
what you're
only-
saying. So instead of just being a string to string map, it would be a string to map. You know,
String to map,
so
correct,
so it would map strings. You know, plugin name to map, and then that
Correct.
map would be a string to string map.
Correct.
So it would
If you
be
see the example that I've put here, that's exactly like that's kind of what I was talking about. If you see the last example, name velero.io/csi, it's the hyphen properties,
Yeah.
line 120 onwards. Cool. I think we have at least some consensus. I can raise a more specific, like I can just update this PR to be more specific on the approach.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. I mean, just wanted to discuss this. Any other thoughts? Please let me know. I can take that into consideration.
One request from my side. Anshu, can you fix the annotation and numbering because it's kind of confusing?
So it's actually marked down, so it's all 1-1. It translates to 1-2-3 in the actual one. When you preview it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, it's the markdown. So when you do and view the file, all that stuff gets
okay.
handled.
Okay. Because in this case, it's like super ugly
see,
and oh, okay, gotcha. All right. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Anyone
folks.
else? Any remarks on this one? Nope. In that case, Ivan, you're next.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everybody. For those whom I haven't spoken to before, my name is Ivan Sim. I'm a software engineer at Dell. Yeah, I'm just hoping to get some advice from this group regarding some scenarios that we have seen out in the fields from users. I know there have been some ongoing discussions and proposals going on related to these scenarios that I've seen, but I'm just hoping to get an up-to-date advice from the group here regarding these two particular issues here. The first one being what do we have any general guidelines around backing up CRDs where the CRs are not created in the target namespace. And what I mean by that is my understanding is currently Velero it with the include cluster resource set to auto or nil, it would try to back up CRDs with CR instances created within the namespaces, right? So what we have seen out in the field is when users try to back up namespace with, for example, operators, the operators themselves might not create specific CRs within their namespace, right? But as you can imagine, the operators would have informers and client go that require the CRD to be applied and deployed to the clusters. So during restore, then the operators will fail and not come up because the backup does not have the CRD included because the CR instances were never created within the namespace of the operator. So I just want to get a sense. I know there's some recent issues about it. I just want to get a sense of do we have any general guidelines around how to deal with that scenarios and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was looking at those two links you had. Probably should mention the one about the include exclude and cluster scope resources first, because that's an active design proposal that's actually going to be happening soon. So the way things work right now, as you mentioned, is that if include cluster scope is set to auto, then the only thing you pull in are those that are specifically relevant to what you're backing up. So that would mean CRDs for the CRs that we're backing up, PVs for the PVCs you're backing up. So one thing you can do right now is if you set include cluster resources to true, that pulls in all cluster scope resources. And you can also exclude types if there's certain things you don't want. That's not particularly flexible, which is why we have this new proposal. The one thing we're going to get with this new proposal, with the latest iteration on the design, is for the cluster scoped resources, the default's still going to be include things as relevant. But if you list resources specifically in the include cluster scope resources field, which is one of the new fields, for those resource types only, we're going to include everything. And then for the ones not listed, we're still doing the bring in as needed. So as an example, if you did a backup and you added CRD, custom resource definition to the include cluster scope resources list, then we'd still only pull in the PVs for PVCs, not everything, but we would pull in all CRDs in the cluster. So
Right.
that would, so I don't know if that meets your use case. That obviously would be pulling in CRDs that not only are the ones that you care about but don't have CRs, but it's also going to be backing up the CRDs that you don't care about.
Yeah. So sorry. So for sure, like this design proposal here with the include and exclude like enhancements, it's highly relevant to us and it will solve our problems. I think well, at least like get us 80% there. I think as you already mentioned, like part of it is now like at least according to this proposal, it will pull in all the CRDs.
Yeah.
And then like so if like if you can imagine if like the users have two operators, they're gonna backing up all the CRD
Your backup
files.
for operator 1 will include operator 2 CRDs and vice versa.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing, all things considered. But when you restore it, then now all of a sudden, like if they are like somehow like different versions of CRDs.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's what I mentioned. This other proposal that you mentioned, I guess it's a pre-existing issue for a proposal to, in addition to the namespace and type-based selection, adding a kind of name-based resource selection. I think there has been a lot of interest in that over time. It's complicated to do it right in a sense that we also, and we need to make sure that any new selection criteria we add kind of merges nicely with the other selection criteria. And for example, with this include cluster scope resource change that we're looking at proposal, really the new scheme that was more flexible that separates out namespace and cluster scope resources is not really compatible with the old scheme. So the way we're handling that one is saying, we have validation to say either do the new way or the old way. You can't really mix them. But I think with the named resource inclusion, that's not really an option. This would be kind of in addition to the other selection rules. So we're going to have to be very careful about how do you handle, you list some resources, and if those are resources that otherwise aren't included, maybe you add them in. But what if they're explicitly there's just a bunch of edge cases that you're going to have to be careful about defining. I had already made some comments on that issue about some of those things that we need to be careful about. Not saying, hey, we don't want to do this, just saying, hey, we got to be careful about getting it right. And these are some of the things that we have to think about, to solve the problem.
Yeah, totally get it. So like so my other question for this particular design here is
so in this case, right, I'm just thinking, so what so Scott, you're saying we can explore this more, or
well, I mean, as I said, we I don't remember when so we have an existing issue that was submitted. There's been some discussion on, but there hasn't really been any recent discussion on it. That may be worth having others in the team kind of look at the proposal and also comment on it, and we can kind of see where this fits into needs and.
Yes. So we were like thinking, right, like what we had in the other proposal, maybe an additional option. So we have these 4 options, right, for this new proposal, an additional option which lets users specify by type and name, right? Maybe a comma separated list of type colon name. So that gives completion in the sense we can pick up right, based on types, but if there are any overrides. So in this case, the issue was, it was the Kong ingress controller, like the issue that Ivan mentioned, where you have CRDs, but there are no CRs, which are created dynamically and removed. So it will cover those scenarios, right? Otherwise, the current proposal doesn't solve the problem where if you're backing up by namespaces, then we can pick some related resources, but there are scenarios that gaps that are not covered.
Yeah, I think, and I had some comments on this other proposal to that effect. I think the thing we need to keep in mind if we're doing this is just we need to figure out how this interacts with the includes excludes in a way that's intuitive to the user. I mean, for example, it's pretty obvious if you say, if you have a list of say 2 resource types to include, and then you have some additional things to include by name only that's not listed in the first, then we just add those in there. But for example, what if the user says they have an explicit exclude of a certain type? does that mean we
So-
don't include anything? You know, that this is where I'm saying, again, we just have to be careful about defining the, you know, the way that users specify this in a way that's clear, that, you know, so we don't end up with these contradictions in the config that, you know, oh, wait a minute, this says include this, but this says exclude this explicitly, you know, which one wins? So, you know, we just have to make sure we're clear in the documents how that's validated and how it works in practice.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So
Sorry,
maybe
I
then
was-
bring this up again with a proposal in the community meeting on how this can be handled. Is that the way to go, or?
The other thing, and again, the other issue is that, I mean, Shubham and I can comment now, but the rest of the maintainers are
Right.
on holiday this week. I think when they're back, we could bring this up again at, say, one of the, yeah, I don't know if you're available in the
Sure.
other time, the
Yeah, we
sort
can
of Beijing
discuss
Central
maybe.
Time Zone
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah.
If you are, maybe bring it up on a topic on that meeting where the others are here. Otherwise, I would say ping people again once they're back from vacation. Maybe ping people on the dev Slack. You know, asking for comments on this issue.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I think definitely like we have taken a look at. I've already looked at this proposal plus the one with the filter by name issues or proposal. I think like as Scott you pointed out, like you know, it sounds like the interest for these features are growing, but like there are some edge corner cases that we may have to consider, especially in ensuring like backward compatibility. There are no surprises there. But yeah, I think like we can you know come to the next community meeting or wait for people to come back from vacation. Meanwhile, like I'm sure like we can also I also have some thoughts about this proposal here. Maybe I can add some comments on it if it is still open to comments and feedback and stuff like that.
Yeah. Go ahead and comment on this one because this isn't going to be merged. And again, these are all things that we're trying to get the design worked out now, so we can start work on them. You know, after 111, because you know this is not going to be in scope for 111 in any case. But we want the design worked out so that we're ready to work on development on it. I would say it does sound like we should probably, I mean, kind of wrap up this design without the kind of named resources, and then kind of treat the named resources as an add-on. Otherwise, things get too complex with one huge change all at once. So I think if you have comments on this particular proposal, that's great. You know, feedback's always welcome. But I'm thinking it's probably best to think about the named resources as an add-on to this once this is approved, so that we can kind of focus on what's different and what changes, rather than trying to go back and think about the entire thing all at once.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think like breaking it up into like relatively smaller bite-sized pieces easier to chew on. But yeah, again, just for the sake of just showing due diligence, like one of the things that we can you all hear me? Oh, okay. So it's Olin who has problem. Okay, so anyways, yeah, so like we definitely explore like existing like options such as using label selectors and stuff like that. I think like the challenges with using labels alone is like for one, like the sheer scales of some of our customers or users some clusters, like sometimes labeling, like as much as we hope it is consistent, it may not be. Plus also there are some operators out there like believe it or not, they actually create like CRD like during runtime, like on the fly, like not within the YAML. So it's like there's no way for users to at least like pre-label things the way they want it to. So it's like the operators have CRD that creates CRD. So you just get it into like like just the turtle all the way down kind of thing. It's like where do it's very complicated, like making the data protection workflow very complicated just by relying on labels. Okay, that's cool. Okay, that's great. So the other one I want to quickly bring up is also like around like not this particular one. Sorry, Alden. Like the last one there. So yeah, it's around like just tail latencies of running a batch of backup jobs. So my understanding right now is like within a backup job, everything is backup sequentially. Ideally, like that would be fast. But if you can imagine, like if users like which is not uncommon these days, right? Like instead of one namespace at a time, they submit like a policy that batch up that batch the entire backup process. It's like, hey, I want to do like 10, 20, 100 namespace backups, all at once. And if you can imagine, like maybe the first 10 backup namespaces are okay, but the tail latency, like by the time you get to the 50, the 60 namespaces, like even if it is like a 1 minute, like per namespace, talking about just the metadata, right? Forget about the PVC alone. By the time you get to like the 50 and the 60 namespaces, you're talking about an hour later of just waiting and queuing, waiting in the queue and stuff like that. So, and this particular proposal and the one prior to it, like I came across this, and I am just wondering, like, is this like more or less like the way forward? Again, recognizing that this is not going to happen, within the next month or two, but I just want to get a general sense of, is this like the one and only like forward proposal for dealing with this kind of like high tail latency scenario, or is this not a problem at all? Does the problem and the scenario make sense?
Anyone to comment on this one? Or
Yeah,
we need
so I think currently we only have this ongoing proposal which is in draft, and Tiger is working on this. So if you have more thoughts on, did you take a chance to review this? I think this is not complete in a sense, but you could add your thoughts and we could try to bunch those together in this design to solve the problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did look through this, and the one the one before this. I think I guess it makes sense until I see, unless we have a chance to prototype it, it's kind of hard to
Mhm.
tell. I guess
Yeah.
the only thing that stood out here is like, we're talking about creating one part. Is it per job or per PVC? I can't remember, but if you can imagine, again, like for a large cluster,
Mhm.
we can be looking at many churns, right? With pods coming up and down. If it is one pod, is it per namespace? I can remember the detail, or per PVC.
Per backup.
We have the author here,
Okay.
Tiger.
Per
Well,
backup.
I was not the original author. I just extended it initially, but it's now basically the same, going to be the same as original PR. Basically, it's going to be a pod per backup.
Mm.
And the
And
idea is to run multiple backups.
So what is the reason for the pod for backup, not like within that Velero main server, right? Like a separate Go routine to handle each backup?
Sorry, what's the question?
So no, I was asking what's the reason for having a separate pod for the backup instead of just being a Go routine within the Velero server? Is
I
it?
don't know. To be honest, I don't know. This is just an original proposal I extended. I would assume it's easier to look at the logs for having separate pods, because if you have a Go routine, I don't know how you want to manage logs per backup.
I guess,
especially like on backup that did not complete successfully, there would be no log in the cloud storage to look at.
Oh, I think like I guess like I guess what Sukarna was pointing out is like I mean, at least on paper we would think like per pod per backup is more scalable, and you sort of like just isolate like the resource requirements and limits without one job, like like just holding up the entire server and stuff like that. But it's really kind of hard to quantify unless like we do some spike on it to say, okay, separating it out into each pod is at the expense of creating more churns and pods coming in going up and down kind of thing. It's actually more efficient than just like, for example, a simpler Go routines within the server and controller. So I guess like question is like the follow-up question from Sukarna's point is like is there? So I guess sounds like this design is still under review, and
And
is there a plan to
maybe
spike it out, or?
what release are we targeting, Tiger, or is still early to say that?
It's still in draft technically, so feel free to leave any feedback, and hopefully it will be incorporated. So
Yeah, it's still not under review. This is still in draft, so the whole design is in progress. But yeah, we would appreciate your feedback. That could help us
Sure.
speed up the design process and help us with the with this feature to put it in Velero's earlier releases. Not planned for Velero 1.11 for sure.
Okay,
Is
thanks.
this like would you would this be like a fundamental? It sounds like a fundamental architecture change.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it like
So
an open heart surgery kind of thing?
yeah, so that's
Okay.
why yeah. So it's gonna take a while to flesh out the details for this design.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to see, like, I mean, for one, it's okay. It's reviewing the design is one thing, right? But also like just recognizing the risk around this kind of
Yeah,
like architecture shift.
because if you take a look at the backup and restore controller, right, both are handling multiple cases, and it's a bit complicated to make changes to those. So,
Okay.
and
And
this is
yeah.
like a fundamental change, as you mentioned. So.
Yeah. Also, like, like without spiking it, it's really hard to tell like the trade-off between like the theoretically the performance improvement versus like now like all of a sudden like there's all these churns around for at least for larger clusters, right? All these pods that come up
And
and down.
the performance metrics also depends on the storage that you're gonna use with Velero, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
storage as well as the network bandwidth. These are the parameters sometimes you don't have a handle on as a Velero developer, I would say. So
Okay.
yeah.
So far, like, have you folks like encountered users with this kind of challenges where like they try to do more than one backup jobs at a time and everything got queued up, or is it just me?
I don't know. Yeah, we have observed it this at scale, like at least the performance team at Red Hat. So
Mhm.
yeah, we recognize this as a problem that you have to solve at Velero scale, Velero level. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure like I'm not going crazy and I'm not
No.
alone.
Yeah, we are
Thanks.
at the same page, I would
Okay.
say.
I'm curious, like, what are the reasons of not using jobs and reverting to pods? Is it just because the chances that the job workload might start more than one pod?
yeah, there's like a little side note in Kubernetes documentation of jobs, how it works, and basically you cannot guarantee that only one comes up for when you create I can't remember exactly, but it's something like you can't guarantee that a single pod will come up. Like it might be two, depending on how the reconciler and the API respond, which mean could cause some issues.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want two pods running the same backup at the same time and then uploading.
Yeah. Especially if the backup job could be expensive, right? You wanna run it twice for this for your one request.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So and meanwhile, like, I mean, obviously, like, we have like users just counting on us to come up with something for them. Meanwhile, like, I guess there's really no workaround, right? Like, as far as I know, also like we can spin up two Velero controller pod, kind of thing, right? That's use case is not supported, right?
I mean, I don't know if there's official support. There might be, but Erlin, you may know this. I'm not sure. You can install Velero and namespaces other than Velero, and it's possible to install Velero twice as long as it's the same version. But I don't know off the top of my head whether we officially support running two at the same time.
And it's possible to say partition it and say, hey, this Velero is responsible for this namespace, and the other one
Well,
responsible.
it's not so much responsible. Basically, when you create a backup, the Velero only looks in the same namespace that's installed for CR. So if you create a Velero, namespace Velero and then Velero 2, if you create a backup CR in Velero 2, then the Velero 2 pod will take the backup. If you click create it in the Velero namespace, then the Velero pod will take it. So Velero only looks in its own namespace for Velero CRs.
Okay, got it. Okay, cool.
But that also
okay.
means, for example, if you install Restic, then you're also going to have 2 Restic pods on every node, and all that.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for thanks everybody for the feedback and the inputs. I'll take a look at the ongoing proposals and see if I can provide some comments and and contribute in some ways. Sukana, do you have any other questions you want to add or feedback, comments?
No, that's it. Ivan, so I guess the next step is for the cluster resources, maybe bring it up in the call with the Beijing team is there.
Yeah, at least I guess the next step, before the meetings, like at least like you and I can take a look at the proposal and see if we can add any comments to it first, and
Sure.
just make sure it's help everyone, and not just our case. Okay, cool. Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
And in terms of scheduling time to talk to the Beijing team, the meeting a week from today, as we mentioned earlier, is currently scheduled, but most likely the majority of that team will not be there. So I would say 3 weeks from today, but this evening, would be the most appropriate time to kind of catch everybody.
Understood. Yep. Cool. Thank you.
And you can ping people on Slack, before then if you want kind of, kind of offline feedback as well.
All right, thank you. But by the way, for these kind of discussions, we have the Velero Dev channel, but it's like filled with some other folks that are just following but not actively contributing. Do you think it makes sense to have like a dedicated for maintainers where all these kind of proposals, which are super specific, to be discussed, like asynchronous? And
I think Velero Dev is low enough volume that would probably be the appropriate place, because we already have Velero users and Velero Dev. So the idea is if you're a user of Velero not making code changes, the Velero users is a place to ask your questions. And if you're talking about PR implementation, design proposals, Velero Dev is the appropriate place. I don't think we really, I mean, there may be some need for a Velero maintainers channel for other reasons, but I think for this, especially since this is a discussion that involves people that are not active maintainers, that are not currently, I think the Velero Dev is the most appropriate Slack channel right now for this.
all right. Okay, just trying to make the process a bit more efficient if possible. All right. Right, I think we run out of topics added for today. Anyone else wants to add something in the very last minute? We have 10 minutes, or we can get back to our days. Nope. Okay. With that, thank you. We'll be waiting for KubeCon announcements in 2 weeks, right? 6th of February should be out. So fingers crossed for everyone who applied. Until then, have a good day, good night, and talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you very much.